Happy Monday, everybody. We made it over the weekend. I hope everyone had a hallelujah good time at church yesterday. I know I did. Um, the subject was see how the enemy tried to snatch the subject from you? Um, testify. Okay. Have you met Jesus? Testify. So basically, tell your story. It will bless someone else, I promise you. Okay. But anyway, there's so many things dealing with perimenopause and menopause that I like to talk about, that I want to talk about. But today, one of the things that kind of crossed my mind was our pelvic floor, talking about our pelvic floor muscles. Now, I'm a nurse, went to school through NP school, and I don't remember a whole lot of subjects talking about the pelvic floor. Now, I will say this is not just specific to women that are going through the change. Anybody and any gender can have a pelvic floor dysfunction. But for me, because of the things that I talk about, I'm hitting more on the perimenopause and menopause side of things because the decrease in estrogen can and does affect that muscle. Okay. So, like, the pelvic floor is basically just that. It's the bottom part of our pelvic area. And the muscles is three muscles. I'm not going to go into their names and all of that because that really doesn't matter. But there's three muscles, and they act like a hammock, so to speak. So it goes like from your tailbone to the front of your pelvic area, and then from basically like from ischial to ischial. So, I just look at it like front to back, side to side. And what does it do? It hold up our pelvic organs. So when you think about that, you think about our uterus for women, our bladder, even part of our bowel. So like our rectum, that's where we evacuate our stool out of, right? And so it supports that. And one thing that is really, I feel like, interesting about that muscle is we don't pay any attention to it until we have problems with it. You just don't think about it because it's so it's such a big part and so important in our overall health that we don't realize there's a problem until there's a problem, right? And so, a lot of women can have like bladder prolapse, uterine prolapse, and that means basically it falls from the area that it normally is in. It almost falls out is what it is. It's different levels to it. I have taken care of women that their vagina, their bladder, their uterus have been protruding out of their vaginal opening. And the first time I saw that, I didn't know what it was. Like, I just couldn't believe it. I could not believe what I was seeing. And so, anyway, we don't have to get to that point. When we have a little bit of pelvic floor dysfunction, we're gonna know it. Some of the problems you can have urinary incontinence or like urgency. You can have problems with like burning, irritation. Part of that muscle also, it helps your urethra. So, you know how when you have to pee and you squeeze your muscles together to hold the pee? Yeah, that's what you're doing. So a lot of people think, well, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but so it's part of that too. And so there's a lot of different things that can cause that to weaken, but the lack of estrogen is one of those things. So, I'm telling y'all, man, estrogen is so important. God, is so important. And, we always knew that it was because once we don't have enough of it and you start having problems, then But outside of like the things that we already know that it can do, we don't think about the other things that are associated with the drop in estrogen, which this is being one of them. And then there's other things like, women that when we have babies, it's just not the same after that. I mean, that muscle have to stretch in order for us to, push our baby out. Um, Obesity, that can play a role in our pelvic floor health, because it's associated with the the pressure in our abdomen, like it responds to that. So it kind of correlates with our diaphragm, which have a lot to do with our breathing. So it's interesting that one of the ways, now I am not a therapist that can help strengthen your pelvic floor. There is actually a specialist that does that, okay? So I want to get that out there. That's my disclaimer, okay? I actually have been to one, and it is quite interesting. But anyway, I just kind of wanted to hit on a few things. I wrote some things down. So one of the things that our pelvic floor does is it constricts our vagina, our anus, our urethra, and it supports the pelvic organs, as I say. It also helps with our trunk stability. So we know our trunk is, from here, from, our chest down, right? So it helps keeping that stable. It's part of our core muscles. So our little corset that goes around our abdomen or our back is part of those muscles group. It's part of our core, I should say. And one of the things is that it responds to the load. I thought that was very interesting. It responds to the load that we carry. So like when we pick something up that's heavy, our pelvic floor responds to that. So, and like I said, when pressure in our abdomen increase, it responds to that. So, that could be a baby, that could be weight gain. Those are the main two things that I think about. And then, like I said, the lack of estrogen, it weakens them. So they're not as strong as they used to be. And that's part of the issue too. And so, one of the things it says, I already talked about so that was like the main things that I wanted to hit on there. And, so if we are having these problems, do not hesitate, do not hesitate to follow up with your provider about this, because going untreated can make it worse. And then we end up with the prolapsed uterus, the prolapsed bladder. We end up with those things. Like I said, share my story a little bit. I actually did see a therapist that specialized in that. And I'm going to be honest, at first I was like, what? We think, oh, you just do some Kegels, right? Where you tighten and loosen. Not saying that don't work, but it's so much more to it than that. That's only helping certain parts of our pelvic floor, because it actually, it goes all, it attached, like I said, to our core. Our core goes all the way up to our shoulders to help us stay upright. And so, I'm going to hit on this more later, but just something to be mindful of, that a little bit of incontinence or urgency or burning, or if you start having frequent urinary tract infections, if you feel pressure down there or like a bulge, definitely if you see something coming out of your vagina or your rectum, that is something that need to be assessed right away, and it should be reported right away. It's not something you want to wait on. And so, like I said, to share my own story, I was having a lot of urgency, like with my urine. So like I would feel how you feel the need to urinate, and usually you can just, at least for me, I can keep working for a little bit and then it's like, okay, I better go. Well, for me, it was like, I feel the urge to urinate and then I better get to a bathroom right away, or I'm going to have some problems. And that became a problem for me being on the road. Sometimes I'm driving 2 hours away. It was times that I literally stopped. I would go from Danville to Springfield, or Danville to Decatur, or down south or up north. I would have to stop like 5 times before I got to my destination, which is a lot. That's excessive, and I'm like running into the bathroom ready to knock people over to get there. And, that's what kind of made me start saying, okay, something else is up, Now, doctors will, or I don't like to just say doctors, providers, they'll try to get to the bottom of it, and they may suggest that you try something that helps with your bladder, and I'm not saying not to do that, but I'm just saying you need to find out the root cause of the problem, in my opinion, if, before you just kind of jump on medicine. And so anyway, so I go to my doctor, and I love my doctor. I feel like she will take my thoughts and concerns serious. And so I ended up seeing a OBGYN, and went there, saw her. She did some assessment and sent me to a therapist who specialized in pelvic floor. And so once I was there, one thing I'm going to tell you, which surprised me. Now, I'm just going to be honest, and maybe this is TMI, but, when I go to my regular doctor, and I'm not saying that I don't shower, I shower every day, sometimes twice a day. But, if you're going to the regular doctor, most likely they're not going to look under your clothes, right? However, if you're going to OBGYN, I know us ladies do this. We make sure we're extra clean down because we know they're going to be in some personal spaces. One thing I didn't know about the PT that specializes in our pelvic floor is they also will examine you down there. So just the FYI, extra clean. It's for yourself and for them as well, And so anyway, so that was part of the examination. They were very thorough. I went to Carl, and they check your muscle tone. They have you do certain exercises. They'll even check the muscle tone in your rectum, because that can be affected as well. And one of the things I didn't know about me, which kind of didn't make sense at first, is she said that I don't totally relax my pelvic floor, which is critical. It's something that, because if you think about it, if it's constantly in a state of contraction, then the contraction kind of get weaker, or there's not further that it can go. So just think about your arm. If you constantly got your arm flexed like this always, and then you try to flex it more, you can't really flex it much more. And that can weaken it and cause some of the issues that I was having. And so she worked with you on helping you relax. And do you know, one of the ways that they help you relax is a very cool breathing exercise, because your pelvic floor responds with your diaphragm. And we know diaphragm is what is associated with our breathing. Without your diaphragm, you'll be in trouble. But so I thought that was very interesting, and just something to think about moving forward is, let's take care of our pelvic floor. Sometimes there's some things we can't help. We can't help our drop in estrogen. We can't help that we had babies. We can't help those things. But moving forward is just being aware and not putting more strain on our pelvic floor. Maybe you don't need to be lifting anything heavy at this point until you see a specialist. Yoga is really, really good for that, and also Pilates. So something to think about. God bless.